Already in the 19th century, the creation of brothels was welcomed in Germany in order to avoid the numerous diseases of the nation. Men, accustomed to the availability of the female body, did not deny themselves the habits of frequent sex and did not consider it immoral to rent a prostitute. And, having changed into a narrow military boot, they felt the lack of familiarity to the soldiers of the whole world and felt the permissiveness of having a weapon. In connection with the numerous cases of rape, homosexuality and diseases of soldiers, on September 9, 1939, Minister of the Interior Wilhelm Frick issued a decree on the establishment of brothels in the occupied territories. Stationary brothels of the Wehrmacht. France became the first and most powerful industry of the female body. Having capitulated on June 22, 1940, she left her numerous brothels to the German occupiers. And in the second half of July, 2 orders had already arrived to curb street prostitution and create brothels for the Wehrmacht. The Nazis confiscated the brothels they liked, recruited management and staff, adhering to the criteria of Aryan racial purity. Officers were forbidden to visit these establishments. Special hotels were created for them. Thus, the command of the Wehrmacht wanted to stop sodomy and the spread of sexually transmitted diseases in the army, increase the incentive and stamina of a soldier, stop intimate ties on the side, because of the fear of espionage and the birth of inferior, and saturate with sex to stop the sexual crimes that undermine the ranks of the army. On September 23, the chief military doctor of one of the 4 districts, B, into which France was divided, reports to the authorities: Bordell für Soldaten sind in fast allen Gro. Beren Orten eingerichtet und wurden laufend überwacht. The brothels for soldiers are open in almost all large cities and are under constant surveillance. The French gendarmerie catches street prostitutes. Sick prostitutes are monitored and sent for treatment. The treatment involved forced abortion, sterilization, injections of hormones and antibiotics. 5 million French men at that time were either imprisoned, or were killed, or fought in the resistance army. The fate of many French women was a foregone conclusion without a man at home. They earned their bread by spreading their legs wide. It was considered a special privilege to work in a hotel where officers were served. Below the level, work was going on in an ordinary brothel, where crowds of sergeants and privates were served. From a November 1940 report from Angers, Die Bordell wurden in 14 Tagen von 948 Soldaten besucht, von denen 467 den Geschlechtsverkehr ausübten, 14 days 948 soldiers 467 sexual acts. In 1942, there were about 500 Wehrmacht brothels in the occupied territories. It is clear that the fruits of such labor employment appeared. Many women were reluctant to have an abortion and preferred to give birth anonymously in the so-called Nazi nursery, Lebensborn. The Nazis themselves welcomed the connections of the soldiers with the women of the fraternal Aryan peoples. Norway, Denmark, Belgium and Holland were the breeding countries of children of good blood. Only registered children were born, about 100,000, and these children could be adopted, taken away from their mother and taken to Germany. France was not an example of blood, but according to the statistics of the National Socialists, about 80,000 Germans were born during the 4 years of occupation. If the Nazis turned a blind eye to love affairs with French women, then the problem of sexual intercourse on the Eastern Front was a sick ulcer. It is known that Himmler was an ardent supporter of the preservation of the purity of the race. Hitler also demanded reports on newborn Germans from the Slavs, who were to become the labor force of Nazi Germany. There were no official brothels in the Soviet Union. In March 1942, Commander-in-Chief Hereth gave the order to create brothels in the occupied territories of the USSR. The Nazis were afraid of partisans and venereal diseases. The girls went through a rigorous selection process. Latvians, Lithuanians and rooted Germans were especially welcomed. The farther inland, the softer the selection criteria became. They were already looking at external indicators. Aryan indicator height not less than 175 centimeters, blonde hair, blue-eyed or gray-eyed, few could withstand, Therefore they recruited healthy, beautiful and more or less able to speak German. In Stalino. A brothel intended for the Germans was located in the oldest hotel in the city, Great Britain. In total, 26 people worked in the brothel. A soldier to visit a brothel received an appropriate coupon from the commander. Within a month, an ordinary soldier was supposed to have 5-6 of them. Underwent a medical examination. Upon arrival at the brothel he registered a coupon and handed over the spine to the office of the military unit, washed himself. The regulations suggested issuing a soldier a piece of soap, a small towels and 3 condoms. According to surviving data, in Stalino a visit to a brothel cost a soldier 3 marks, paid to the cashier, and lasted an average of 15 minutes. Brothels existed in Stalino until August 1943. In September 1942, Colonel General Schmidt informs Hitler of the birth of 750,000 children from Slavic women. This causes distrust. Slavic women forcibly had sexual intercourse and were reluctant to report the birth of children, and the Minister of the Reich Rosenberg makes his own check. According to his data, fewer children were born, but not by many. The fate of these women and newborn children is terrible. It is no secret that many went into prostitution to support themselves, but many were forced to copulate. In the cities of Narva and Kingisepp, brothels are being created for Wehrmacht officers. Girls and women from the villages are brought to these houses. Those who do not want to stay in a brothel are shot. Women were caught, their heads were shaved and a swastika was painted on their foreheads. In France they are so bald. Beauties met on every corner. Women themselves put a stigma on themselves. The stigma remained for life. German bedding, skin. In the post-war years, the topic was not discussed, as if this horror had never happened. And children born during the occupation still do not know the whole truth. Therefore, look at yourself in the mirror. Maybe the blood of the enemy flows in you? An entry in the diary of General Halder 23 Juni. Es verläuft alles nach Plan, current issues. 1. POW camps are overcrowded. 2. Tankers demand new motors. 3. Troops move fast. Brothels do not keep up with the parts. The Nazis still did not trust the priestesses of love from the occupied territories and drove brothels on wheels with well-trained German women. From 5 to 20 women working in a field puff were listed as employees of the military department. The girls went through a rigorous selection, purebred Aryans, often ardent National Socialists, working solely from patriotic motives. In a month, an ordinary prostitute had to appease at least 600 soldiers. Special prostitutes worked in aviation and navy, their labor indicator was 60. The soldiers were given coupons, up to 5 per month, which they could go to during their dismissal in a poof. To remove the girl cost 3 Reichsmarks. Coupons were a disciplinary reward, there could be more than 5 or less. Before each visit, the women were checked by a doctor, and the soldiers were given condoms and soap. For the war, young and strong men were always required, who for many days and months had to be in a state of stress in a purely male team. Women who made their income trade in their own bodies, among the soldiers found a great demand for the services offered. The 2 oldest occupations, war and prostitution, found their common ground in military brothels.